Dr. Jazz.
Lou, I wanted to ask you, like,
Dr. Jazz.
you've been active for such a long time, and I listened the other day to the Smalls trio with Yasushi Nakamura and Victor. I mean, Victor is amazing as well. You sound amazing, as if you did, I don't know, 50 years ago or something like that, as fresh as ever. And where they get the energy from, and are you still writing some new music these days, or like what's for you now your instruments, or let's say daily routine, or how do you keep it strong still as you do? I mean,
well, I try to keep it going. During the pandemic, obviously it was quite difficult. Fortunately, Yasushi was in the neighborhood, not too far from me, and it was a drummer, Jason Tiemans, not that far, and we would get together, try to get together weekly to try to get some chops. And the first attempt was horrible. I mean, I play fairly strong equipment for saxophone for these days. I play, I have to blow pretty hard. I'm old school. So anyway, kept on doing it, tried to do a gig, and they said, "Oh, we want you to do 2 hour and a half sets." So about 45, 50 minutes into the first set, I could feel the muscles like kind of, oh man, I'm not going to make it. So that was my first experience. It was at the Deer Head Inn, actually. So anyway, kept on doing a few things, and the chops started to come back. Now I'm trying to play more. The only way you can really keep up, your chops, not only physically but mentally, is by playing. I'm used to going out or playing in a club for a week and going on a tour, and then everything comes together. But when that's not happening, you can't maintain.
Yeah.
So fortunately, I have a monthly residence in Michiko Studios on 46th Street, and I play there. It's a once a month thing, so it's every month it's a comeback. So I'm always in comeback mode, and I don't like it. I like to, if you get 2 nights in a row, like the second night gets really cool. First night might suck, but the second night is cool. So I need some continuity, but I try my best. And Spike gives me a gig once in a while. We used to get 2 nights. Now he gets it down to 1 night, which could be 2 nights is much better.
Yeah.
So the gig with Victor, I hadn't played with Victor in I don't know how many years. I mean, in a small group situation.
Yeah.
He's on my first Concord CD with Hank Jones and David Holland. And not a bad rhythm section.
No, absolutely not.
That was a long time ago. I can't even remember how long it was. But anyway, it was interesting because I've been doing the trios thing since around 1967 or so.
Yeah.
I always liked the trio because I used to listen to Sonny Rollins when I was a kid. I used to go see him. The trio was the best because he could develop lines, and he could just play, and it was always fun, interesting, musical, also uplifting. I started to understand how to develop solos, how to use compositional form in a way. You play an idea, then it might come in like 4 courses later. It's like I guess they call it recapitulation. you know. But anyway, that always inspired me. I love the challenge, and without having a chord instrument, you have to always be aware of the harmony, and you have to. If you don't imply the harmony, if you just go out there and, I don't want to use an obscene word, but if you just go out there and just play, and it's like there's a story of Frank Forster had a great line when he was doing a clinic, and there's a guy who was playing, and they were playing a blues, a B-flat blues, and this guy was playing all kinds of shit. Didn't make any sense. So Frank stopped him and said, "Man, what are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm trying to express myself." He said, "Well, express yourself in the key of B flat." So a lot of guys would do trios, but they don't pay attention to outlining the harmony. So it's boring. You have to be able to I think a trio works with a tenor because the sound is big, covers a lot of space. And if you can imply the harmony, and you can create melodies and go on try to create a line. So when it happens, it's really beautiful. So I've been doing that for a million years, since '67, and I did it in New York as a youngster, and then I moved to LA. I did it with Billy Higgins, which wasn't bad. Anyway, so that I do these trio things. Once in a while, I'll add a trumpet, so that I like to interact with people.
Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting. Basically, there was a Facebook controversy going on. Not a controversy, kind of a discussion. There was an article in the New York Times. I kind of read it. I couldn't completely read it. It was such bullshit that I couldn't deal with it. It was like, it's basically they try to redefine jazz, and they try to redefine creativity. They treat, and cutting edge, or whatever. It's been going on for years. A pseudo-intellectual critic can't understand beauty. So it's like, oh, you do something with the synthesizer, you do something with electronic shit, or you're doing something, supposedly advanced. It's nonsense. So the whole tendency in the media in the last 20, 30 years is always to confuse art with fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, like, is Louis Armstrong old-fashioned? Is Lester Young old-fashioned? Is Bach old-fashioned? Is Debussy old-fashioned? I mean, art is art. Music is music. Its style is secondary.
Yeah, sure.
It's how you create within the style that makes sense. So, they try to create this jazz is dead mentality, and if you're not doing some new kind of shit, you may as well forget about it. So I felt like, well, if this guy was true, I may as well stop playing. What am I doing? I mean, I'm just trying to create some personal expression, and that's been my whole life, and it's a continuum. And as long as I can blow hard, which I can blow harder than most of these young guys. And so I spent a lot of time working on sound production. When I hear these things, like when I hear myself sometimes, like on a live stream, and if I end a note and I don't end a note right, it just stops. I get pissed off. I didn't have enough air. You have to end a note in a beautiful way, because ending a note is your signature. It's like, if you're a painter, you sign a painting. The way you end a note, the way you use a nuance at the end of the note, it's your signature. And I'm preoccupied with that. And as I get older, I have to really concentrate on breathing. I like to use the Oscar Pediford breathing technique. I mean, if you listen to old records with Oscar, he breathes. Breathing is really loud,
Yeah.
and he doesn't have to because he's not playing a horn. But the breathing kind of defines the phrase.
Yeah.
Like whatever it is. So I try to make sure I have a proper breath so I can end a fucking note. It's like, it's so important to me. Those are the things that are important. I mean, among others, of course. But nobody, nowadays, it's not necessary. The more eighth notes you can play, the more patterns, the more faster you can play. That's it. But that's boring.
Mhm.
To me, it's boring. I hear some really wonderful technical players, but I say, well, wait a minute. I'd like to hear one beautiful note. It would be nice.
Mm. Yeah.
If that makes any sense to what you
No, it does,
you're
actually.
talking about.
It does, because you mentioned Sonny and like Life at the Village Vanguard. If you put it on now, or Tanner Madness, or whichever Saxophone Colossus, it's still so modern, even now. Like, and it's so beautiful also, and and beats like probably 90% of the records that come out now, at least. Just because of this beauty and the phrases, what you said, and
Well, it's like I once had a review at Dalby a long time ago. It was a 5-star review. I used to get mostly 5-star reviews, no gigs, but a lot of reviews. And
that's helpful. Yeah.
the guy said something I never forgot what this guy said. He said something about, I would be a marketer's dream first if I didn't look so professorial. That was funny. Second was, because I am on the cutting edge of retro bop. I never forgot that because it never made any sense to be cutting edge of retro.
That's a oxymoron there. Yeah.
That to me.
Yeah, but that's a good marketing.
Exactly.
Marketing phrase. That's a good one.
Yeah, but me, he loved the music, but he was like how he heard it.
Mm.
I mean, we're all players. We all come from different generations.
Yeah.
I started out, I played free jazz, and I was a Coltrane clone. I went through a lot of stuff.
Really? I didn't know that. Wow, okay.
Try to find my identity. And when I was, it was kind of like I would imitate Coltrane, early Coltrane, like I'm 20, 21, what I was. And anyway, and then I would go out and hear other players. And I hear a lot of white guys trying to play like Train. I said, boy, that sounds really bad, stupid. And I said, maybe I'm just as stupid. So I don't think I was. I think I captured a certain essence. So then I figured, what's the way to get out of this unusual or what's the right word? It's kind of a bullshit way of emulating someone. You go in a bandstand and you're a method actor, and it's stupid. So there was a trombone player in Philadelphia who had a record collection, and he played all these records of all the great tenor players that I never really heard.
Who were they?
Lester Young, I mean, perfection. And played Ben Webster ballad. It's like, wow, tragic beauty. I mean, it's incredible. Don Byas, I never heard a tenor played like that. Greatest virtuoso of all time. Because he could play fast with a big sound, which is very difficult to do. Most of the guys that play a lot of notes have a small sound because sound gets in the way of execution in a way. But it was amazing. Played all these guys, and it got to Coleman Hawkins. I couldn't get it. It was too hard. was like, I just couldn't understand it.
Mm.
And then years later, the light bulb went off. I said, oh shit, that's the secret. I mean, that's the secret. That's the root of all everything. That's the basis. I mean, Hawkins was told. I mean, still doesn't get proper credit. I think he was. I think Hank Jones was aware of the fact that Hawkins was more sophisticated in many ways than Byrd. He was so harmonically sophisticated. So at that age, I couldn't get it. But later on, I began to appreciate his greatness. And anyway, so I started listening to all these different players and try to absorb certain essence of the players, like, you know, Lester's buoyancy that he had, spacing, and Ben Webster's incredible sound, and I try to absorb some of the elements. So then when I would go to hear my hero, Sonny Rollins, I could hear all that stuff. I said, wow, that's Hawk. Wait, that's Prez. And so it gave me the idea, or reinforced the idea, that the way to find yourself is to get all these influences and put them in a pot and you mix it up, and something different comes out. Pepper Adams used to say that if you copy one or two people, it's plagiarism. If you copy a lot of people, it's research.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, so I used to be able to do, like, I play a little bias, play a little Ben Webster or whatever, but that's not the way to go either. So I tried to put them all together and to find my own voice. And by the time I hit 40, I think I found my voice. It takes a long time. And I remember I was playing in Nice Jazz Festival, and Jimmy Heath came over to me. He says, "Man, you know, your sound got so great, and everything is coming together." And he said, "But you're 40." Very kind to me. You know, he was, and he one of the greats. And one day he's playing at the half note, and he came off the bandstand and he said, "You know, this is the first time in my life I feel confident when I'm on the bandstand." And I couldn't believe that he said that, because he always sounded great, confident, whatever. And the fact that he actually told me that he confided in me, I felt like, wow, I'm just a peanut, you know. And he's actually treating me like a colleague. Anyway, then I thought about it. I said, well, he was probably around 40. And even though he was playing all those years at such a high level, his confidence hit at that age.
Yeah.
And so I think it's not a rule, but it's kind of a little guide, especially nowadays when people don't get to play as much as they used to. You don't go on the road for 360 days. So you play a gig here, play a gig there. So it takes longer to find your voice.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the secret is to find your voice. Like when I was young, I just started to play. I was trying to play, jazz. I played the flute a little bit. I was pretty sad. I played a little clarinet, but I'm playing the tenor. I wanted, that was my goal, to be, a great jazz musician. And after a few months, I realized I wasn't going to be the next Byrd. So I decided, well, maybe I'll just become a kind of utility musician, do shows or whatever, stuff. I could be a doubler.
Mm-hmm.
And then after about 6 months, I said, that's bullshit. I said, if everybody felt this way I did, there wouldn't be any players, because nobody's going to be able to. How many people are going to, reach a level of Byrd? So I said, well, the next step, if you can't be the next Byrd, you have to be the first Lew Tabackin. You have
That's
to
beautiful.
be. You have to find your voice, and you can make a contribution by having a personal approach. And this is who I am. Some people like it, some people don't. It's not important. He said, you're here, you're playing, you do something that has some value and maybe hopefully inspire others.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but I wanted to ask you about, you said the doubling and, developing your own language. And I think on flute, I mean, on tenor and on flute, you're like, have a very unique way of playing. I think in the, let's say, this flute heritage, if, Joe Farrell, Hubert Laws, all the greats actually of your generation. And how did your story with improvising on flute begin? Actually, I know you studied classical music on flute, but like, how did you start?
No, I did. Well, it's a misconception. Basically, I got a scholarship to conservatory because, well, I just wanted to play jazz music. They didn't have jazz. It was a classical place.
Okay.
So I got in as a flute player. I wasn't that interested in that. So I went there because I did get a scholarship and my mother wanted me to go someplace. I would have rather stayed, just practice. But anyway, I learned something, but as far as the flute goes, I was really sad. However, the last year I had the new principal flute player of the Philadelphia Orchestra came in. His name was Murray Panitz. And he must have been in shock when he heard me play. So I was so bad. And so he started from the beginning. Here, I'm in my last year in conservatory. I should be pretty good, right? He started me at the beginning and taught me all the things I didn't know, which was about everything. The overtone series, how to produce the overtone series on the flute, how the embouchure is supposed to feel. He has theories about that. And so every week I go in and I really make a lot of progress. And after a month or so, I started to sound respectable. And so that is basically the extent of my classical training.
Okay.
Now, how I learned to play was the same way I learned to play saxophone. I listened to records, mostly classical records. I wasn't a fan of, I think Frank West was a quintessential jazz flute player. I realized that, the tenor saxophone has this great history.
Yeah.
It's amazing, starting with Hawkins. The flute is not a major jazz instrument, probably because of the dynamic limitations. You play the flute, drummer is cooking, you don't have a microphone, you may as well go home.
Yeah.
So everything is a compromise. Everybody, you either have to use a mic and a monitor. Everybody's got to play soft. So it has limitations. So, Marcel Moïse, the great flute pedagogue, he said he claimed that the flute is a minor instrument, and it actually compared to the violin and the piano, so to speak, basically because of dynamic limitations.
Yeah.
So anyway, I figured, well, I try to follow in a way, jazz tradition on the saxophone, or hopefully try to add a few things. But playing the flute gives me an opportunity to create my own tradition. So I started out like trying to play like my solos would be more like impressionistic, French impressionistic shit, like, which is cool because it works, I mean, that's a lot of bebop comes out of that. I mean, a combination of Debussy and Bach. I mean, and so anyway, I started to do that, and I listened to flute players like when I was in Philly. The great flute player William Cade was there. I got to hear him, and then I would listen to Julius Baker records, Jean-Pierre Rampal. He was a great flute player that used to play on contemporary music records, Tom Nyfinger. So I would listen to a lot of people, and I try to take the sounds that really hit me and use sound as a way to create improvisation. Sound would I play a note, it would tell me what the next note would be. So I tried to develop an approach that wasn't a non-bebop approach, put it that way. Because I felt that most of the people that play double, I don't like to consider it a double. I consider it two instruments. But the doubler mentality, saxophone player plays the flute, plays the same shit on the flute as the saxophone. Just sounds different because it's a different sound, but it's the same music is coming out. And I felt that it was redundant to do that.
Yeah.
So I try to avoid that. Once in a while, it sneaks in, but I try to maintain my integrity as a flute player. And it's very difficult because just to have the sound that you like.
Yeah.
Sound is so important to me on both of my instruments. So if I pick up the flute after playing the tenor for 20 minutes and blowing my brains out, and I pick up the flute, I'm supposed to find the hole. There's a little hole here called the aperture. I have to find that. The muscles have to be cool.
Yeah.
I have to basically, deal with like the breathing. People would ask me, how do you do it? And I said, well, the best way to do it is to maintain the best embouchure you have on the flute. And when you pick it up after playing the saxophone and it doesn't feel right, it doesn't sound right, relax, don't get frustrated.
Yeah. Try
to let the air support control, the situation. And eventually sound comes back. And so there's no answer, but it's a challenge. And I sometimes I say, why am I doing this? It's too hard. People say, you're not supposed to do that. I mean, I have a sound in my head, and I have some wonderful classical music friends. Very, very close, and I get information from them, and I give them information. I even taught one to improvise. He was a principal in Chicago, and we actually did a couple of gigs together. I said, just follow the form and just create a melody. Don't think about jazz. If you think about playing jazz, it's going to sound stupid. When classical players try to play jazz, it usually sounds dumb.
Yeah.
So just think about, just play lines, just try to make a melody. Here's how the harmony goes, and create a second melody. And he sounded great. He I just keep the form. He did. So I have a couple great French flute player friend, Nico Duchamp, and one of my heroes, Patrick Galois, who's got the most amazing sound, and we communicate. He comes to see me in Paris. I get a lot of respect from classical players because they appreciate what I'm trying to do. I'm not just, like fluting around with a microphone. It's so I'm serious about all this shit, and it's like I get frustrated sometimes. I say, maybe I should just cancel. Most people kind of, but I have to see it through. It's like it was a great Japanese woodcut artist, Hiroshige. He said, "Oh, he was really old. He was getting ready to die." He said, "Please give me 10 more years so I can become an artist." And that's basically the mentality that you have to kind of. I said, "Give me 30 more years, I can be a contender." I just have to. It's like the Jean-Paul Sartre concept, existential concept of in becoming.
Yeah.
You're always in the process. You're never a musician or whatever. You're in becoming. You're never like practicing medicine. Same kind of concept. You're practicing.
Yeah.
So that I don't know when I get frustrated and disappointed in my playing. I figured I get moments where I say maybe I'm supposed to quit. Maybe it's time. So I said, no, I have to keep going. I'm waiting for that next magical moment where everything works and everything is beautiful. You know what that's like. Once in a while in your life you play and everything is just flows. It's like you're in a zone, they say in sports.
Yeah.
And everything works. All the lines connect. And so those are the moments to live for. But they're getting more and more rare. Maybe my expectation is too high, but I don't know. One time I had an interesting experience. I was playing at Birdland, and I'm playing Introduction to a Ballad, and I landed. I was a tenor. I landed on a middle C concert, a D on the tenor, which is a kind of a interesting note in a way. It's and I tried to put as much information into that one note as I could. I just tried to put everything into that one note, and I could feel the audience come into the note. And I said, well, that's a Zen experience. I mean, that's another thing to try for. Because like now, when you go out to play, most people don't know what they're listening to. Like Art Blakey used to say, you have to be educated to understand jazz. By education, he meant listen a lot. So you go in a club and maybe have some fans, but generally speaking, people usually listen according to what they hear in the media. Somebody writes an article and says, oh, this guy is the next thing, blah, blah, blah. And they listen. They might hate it, but they think that it's their fault. It's like, well, I didn't, I'm too stupid. So I'd like to approach playing in a way to bring the audience in, not in a superficial way, but in a way of, I like to play acoustic.
Yeah.
So people can feel the sound. Sometimes they really notice it, because they're not used to hearing it like that. And I try to, bring them in a certain way and transcends generational realities.
Yeah.
Which why that stupid article in the Times was like created such a storm in the Facebook. It kind of put down Smalls somehow because it wasn't on the forefront of new music, whatever they think. So jazz music is I could paraphrase Zoot Sims. Somebody asked Zoot, hey Zoot, what's the hardest instrument to play? He says, man, music is a hard instrument.
Yeah.
And music is a hard instrument, and communication is a hard instrument, and the whole the whole jazz world is a hard instrument. It's like it gets more difficult all the time, because if I have to play at a festival or I check some stuff out on the internet, I can't relate to it. It doesn't make sense to me. I go to play in a jazz festival. I don't know anybody, and they're big stars, and I don't know who they are, and I don't know there has to be a reset button somewhere, because of, if they feel that to just be able to play, make a nice, beautiful statement with a nice sound, a nice rhythmic feel, if that is irrelevant, well, there are a lot of great irrelevant people, and it's I don't know how to explain it, but I start to feel more alienated as years go on. I used to think that, like, when you're young, people might listen to you. Like when you're middle-aged, you're nothing. You have nothing. When you're old, that's when people start, demographic starts to move in your favor. You get the legendary blah, blah, blah. Total bullshit. If you're old enough, you're a legend. So I thought that maybe by the time I got to be 75, 80, that would kick in, but it hasn't kicked in too much, because they're overwhelmed by all this. A lot of times it's like party music, dance, like another form of dance music. And subtlety. Like I like small environments.
Intimate.
And I'd like to think of like chamber music reality, and you play, communicate directly with the audience. And so I guess that's not so bad. I guess I had this fantasy. I always thought that it would be great if Sonny Rollins in his later years would be like the next Pablo Casals kind of thing, and show up at a concert hall, no microphones, nothing, and just play beautiful music. People would line up to hear him. No need to try to change, not exactly evolve, but change. And I think that's, I think that was always something that I thought would be wonderful for the audience to hear pure music coming out of an instrument, pure creativity.
Yeah.
So anyway, but that's my limited evaluation of the scene today. So it's like, I guess I shouldn't have read that article yesterday. It tainted my.
No, come on. No, it's beautiful. But I wanted to ask you, let's say late 50s or early 60s, do you remember those intimate moments? I mean, did you see those guys live, like Train or Sonny Rollins, and how did that? How was the
like breaking up a little bit?
In the late 50s or early 60s, do you remember those moments live on concerts? Either when you played the intimate venues in New York, or if you saw Train or Sonny Rollins live, how was that like for you? Like what kind of an experience, if you can?
Well, the one good thing about growing up in Philadelphia, or almost growing up, there were two major clubs that I used to go to. One was called Pep's, and one was the Showboat. Pep's guy would let me in. Showboat, I'd sneak in with a fake card. I'm a teenager. And anyway, I go to hear Sonny Rollins, and I remember it really clearly so many times. And you walk out of the club and you're up, you're smiling, you're inspired. Next week you go across the street to Coltrane is playing, and he's playing, and he's playing, and he's playing, and you get mesmerized. You can't take in that much, and you kind of get into a trance. And then after he plays a set, he goes in the kitchen and practicing the whole intermission. But it was like total opposite thing. As a young person to experience that was quite great. It was, Train was like the spiritual. I'm getting message. My battery's low. I can, but anyway, it was interesting to experience that. And I heard Coltrane's first group was Pete LaRocca and piano player, really wonderful piano player. I just can't think of his name. And from Boston. Anyway, and I heard that, and then his stuff changed. Elvin and McCoy and Garrison. The hookup between Coltrane and Elvin was it for me. And I was so fortunate when I moved to New York in '65. Just to be able to, I'd be playing with, I got to play with Elvin because I became Joe Farrell's sub, and he would send me in with Thad Jones and Mel Lewis and Jingle Dates, and I sat in with Elvin, and Elvin liked me, so I would cover for him what he couldn't do. So I to this day I regret not being really good enough. I guess Elvin tolerated me. I was searching I was 25 or 6, searching for what I wanted to do, to say. But if it was like saying even 5 years after, I would have been more ready to contribute more. But it was an incredible experience playing with Elvin. It was like a big, instead of like one beat or one bar or 4 bars or 8 bars, it was one big space that you function in this one space. It was so amazing. I never experienced it after that. It was really quite great. So I was fortunate to have a lot of good experiences. Sometimes I regret that I wasn't good enough. I wish I was better. I'm a slow developer.
No, but come on, you do this. I mean, you played on those records with Donald Byrd, with it's like Ron Carter, Mickey Roker, all these, Bob Cranshaw. I don't know, like. How did you become
I played with a lot of guys.
Scene? Yeah. How was it like for you integrated in the scene, to be integrated in that scene in the late '60s? How did that process go?
I didn't hear it. I couldn't hear you. Say that again.
Yeah, like your integration process in the late '60s in the New York scene. How did that happen for you?
Well, I don't know how it happened. I just one thing led to another. I wound up. This is really weird. I was never a big band person. Never had any experience at all.
That's funny, yeah.
And so the mythology, and unfortunately, the mythology in New York was, if you're white, you can read. If you're black, you play jazz. So, it was ridiculous. So I got some gigs. I learned by trial and error anyway. But I wound up very fortunate to join Duke Pearson's big band, which was really great. I mean, it was the best rhythm section. Mickey Roker and Bob Cranshaw. That was heaven. Anyway, that was like a family. That was great. And I played in Clark Terry's band, Clark Terry's all-star band. I was the only non-all-star. Anyway, I played with, I mean, I could write a book about all this shit. I mean, it's like, it's so much, but we're talking about being integrated in the late 60s and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, because of Duke Pearson, that association, you know, I got to do, you know, the Donald Byrd stuff. I did a couple albums with Donald Byrd.
Yeah.
One album was called Kofi.
Yeah.
He said, I'm playing the flute. And he said, just play out, you know, just play out, you know. Yeah. So I said, well, whatever that is, I did my best. And now he was really, Donald was very nice. So I was lucky people were tolerant. And then a strange thing kind of happened in a way. I got caught up in the Black Revolution, you know, which I was a great supporter of the Black Revolution, but it didn't do me any good. So all of a sudden I became demographically challenged. And can you imagine Randy Brecker and I playing in Duke Pearson's band at the Apollo Theater and not be allowed to play any solos?
Oh man, really?
We couldn't stand up and play solos.
Oh wow, shit.
And Duke tried to get us a record date, and they weren't doing any white guys. So it was an interesting time. And so a friend of mine, John B. Williams, bass player, he moved to Los Angeles with Doc Severance's band. And I was doing some gigs with Doc Severince to make some bread. And he says, come on out here, man. It's great. I'm playing all the time. And so I said, well, why not? So I was offered, you know, a certain amount of nights on the Tonight Show. And I went to LA, and shortly after I realized I might have made a mistake because I was used to a certain kind of intensity in New York, and I couldn't get that out there. And I always felt like when I played, it was me and them until two good things happened. One, Billy Higgins came over to my place and we played, and I said, "Oh man, I'm cool. Everything's okay. It's not me, it's them." And then I started working with Shelly Manne.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Another generation. He was the most wonderful guy, and people don't understand how he goes. One of my favorite records is the record with Coleman Hawkins, the man I love, Eddie Haywood, and Oscar Pediford, and Shelly's playing on it. And so Shelly went through a lot of evolution. You know, it's very, you know, advanced musician. So I was fortunate to play with those guys. And so, and then out of boredom, I asked Toshiko to kind of do a band. She had some charts, and so that's another story.
That's how that happened. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, my interviews get too long because I keep on thinking of things that happened.
Oh no, man! I'm like, this is. I love listening to this. It's like for me, you know, it's like I'm like a kid in a sandbox or whatever. It's just like, please, you know, it's you guys created so much history and so much great music. So it's just like it's a privilege to hear you talk. So please, don't feel, you know, limited. If you know. I love hearing this.
Yeah. So anyway, that's another part of thing. Another one of my philosophies is always turn a negative into a positive.
Yeah.
Here I'm in LA, and I don't like it, but I managed to create an entity in LA. In New York, I played with all these bands. I played with people, but I never had my own thing, my own entity. And in LA, you know, I established my trio with Higgins and different bass players. Sometimes, one time I did a tour with Billy and the bass player. My name recognition starts to slip. Play with Ornette, Charlie Hayden.
Charlie Hayden, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so Billy and Charlie, that was an interesting experience.
That was a trio you had?
Yeah, we did. We went on tour to San Francisco, Canada.
Oh man.
That was really special because they had a great hookup.
Yeah.
And then as far as Charlie's bass lines, he didn't always play the harmony, so I had to play the harmony sometimes more. I'd have to, so I could go either way. I could concentrate on the changes, or I could just work on the key centers. I had a choice, in other words. And with Higgins played the more changes than Charlie did. I think it's just like his shit was like, to get to the bridge, it's the bridge. And I really enjoyed that. And I had a lot of guys. Like, one of my favorites was Dannie Richmond.
Oh man, really?
Dannie Richmond used to do that with music.
Oh man.
Dannie Richmond swung harder than anybody.
He's such an underrated drummer.
Different bass.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, he was like, he started out as a saxophone player, and he said he got to a point where he couldn't get any better. He started playing drums. I'm glad he did that. We have enough saxophone players. But anyway, I'm fortunate. I mean, in a lot of ways. And I look back, I don't, right now I'm in a period of frustration, not feeling that great about my playing. I work at it every day, but the lack of work, if that's the right word, lack of playing. You play in the basement, it's not the same as playing in public. It's a different, it's a different reality. So hopefully, I used to do yearly tours of Japan with my trio, with Boris Kozlov and Mark Taylor. We did about 20 years. And, you come back from a tour playing every day, almost every day, everything is cool.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for that to happen again so I can evaluate my reality. Instead of am I cool? Have I found some enlightenment? I'll keep on waiting for it. I did a recording with John Lewis years ago, duet recording. And that was a great education because he crystallized the music. He didn't play anything extra. And I'm playing, and I used to play, I had a lot of chops and played a lot of notes normally. I realized quickly, I can't do that. It really sounds stupid. So I really tried to work off of his inspiration and try to get rid of a lot of the bullshit.
You mentioned Desert Lady, and I love that record, with Dave Holland and Victor Lewis and Hank Jones. And also your writing, like Desert Lady, or a bit biased. We mentioned Don Bias before. What has been your process regarding composition, and how has this developed when you look at it now through the years? Or how did you get ideas, or how did you compose usually, or do you still do that?
Well, I'm not much of a composer. I'm like more of a decomposer, actually. I'm a deranger.
That's a good one.
I would take tunes or things and I could change them around a bit. But as far as composition, sometimes I need, in practical sense, I need something for recording or something. So then I squeeze my brain. Desert Lady was kind of inspired by a movie. The translation is "Woman in the Dunes." It was like a Japanese movie about a guy that falls into a sand dune, and anyway, it was kind of an underground adventure. And Toru Takamitsu wrote the music.
Hmm.
Who was a great composer. He became kind of a friend in a way. So I know that was a little germ. So I wrote this very simple thing. And like, I like to use simple harmonies for the flute because you have a chance to expand the sound and develop a line, and so it was basically it's a D seventh and an E flat seventh. I mean, with kind of all kinds of stuff you can do. But anyway, sometimes I don't know. I might be inspired by something, or sometimes a lot of times it's just I need something. I need a certain tune for a certain kind of thing, and I do it. I force myself because I'm like I can sit around and improvise. I can play like what could be a tune, but I know I'm too lazy to like. I'm in the moment, so I have to sit down and say, okay, well, I come up with a phrase and I try to develop a phrase, but I'm not much of a composer, to be honest. And more and more, I realize my harmonic inadequacies, and I think I'm going to have to stretch that out a little bit. I wrote a couple relatively intricate tunes. I wrote a tune called "Falling Petal," which was for the last cherry blossom falling down. The last cherry blossom descending the tree. I tried. Basically, I guess when you mention it, I'm a narrative person. When I play, 90% of the time, it's a narrative approach. Even on a tune, I try to set up a narrative, and like especially on the flute, I like to. I do the thing once in a while with a ballet dancer. I ran into this ballerina at a classical music jam session in Harlem. Now that makes a lot of sense. Right? Lou Donaldson would have a ball with that one, Don't play the blues in Harlem. But anyway, I met this girl, and she's like fearless ballerina, a Russian girl, belongs to a company. Anyway, so we get together sometimes, and she'll join me in a gig or something, and I really like that interaction. So I'll come up with an idea. Like I had a thing. I used to do the Rites of Pan thing I did years ago with Shelly Manne, and I try to develop that. Last one I did with her at my Michiko gig, I tried to use that concept, and like the Pan and the nymph kind of thing, So try to interact with her. It's kind of fun. It's kind of a little sensual too, which I kind of like. Don Byas had a great line. He said, "I don't play the saxophone. I play the saxophone." So there's a certain sensuality in music.
Definitely.
I think maybe that's missing. Sexuality, sensuality. I can kind of get off on that too. So I like to come up with an extra musical idea and develop that. But I don't do too much. I think I'm going to have to force myself to do it because I spend so much time working on a couple notes so they sound right, and which is not a good thing. So I have to come to terms with that idea. So basically, now that you mention it, most of the things that I write are narrative pieces. And like I say, I play in a narrative style. When I play the flute, I want to be like telling it. So it's kind of another form of Lester Young, where's the story, and I like to have a story. If I don't have a story, I find it difficult to play. Even the straight ahead tenor saxophone stuff. I like to kind of have some kind of in my brain, some kind of a narrative to stay, because just playing the changes is not enough.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like telling a story. Like that's what I tell to my students, how to improvise when they start. You have words, which are notes, and with those words, you have to tell a story. So that's kind of this.
Yeah, that's Lester Young, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Where's the story? Where's the story, Press? And so that's the thing. So the narrative is quite important. So that if I have any compositional technique, which I don't, the narrative, the story is a thing. If I want to write a romantic piece for somebody, I can do that. But I have to hide the title.
Yeah. No, but it's true what you say. All the jazz standards and beautiful compositions have a story, right? Lyrics, of course, behind it, but
yeah,
it makes sense. It's
a lot of guys wouldn't. People wouldn't. Well, here's an interesting thing. Maybe you can fill me in on what you think. To concept of playing say a ballad, mainly a ballad. Some people don't play it unless they know the words. Okay, Dexter Gordon, supposedly Ben Webster. Certain guys, have to know the lyrics. I kind of know a little. I kind of make my own lyrics, in a sense, because I'm too lazy to learn the real lyrics, and I make my own lyrics sometimes. But there's two ways. Now, there's playing the melody. You play a tune and you play the melody, and you embellish it, and then play a solo. And then there's the other way. There's the Coleman Hawkins way, who doesn't play the melody at all, or almost doesn't play the melody at all. Body and soul is hardly any melody, but it's body and soul. Maybe if you didn't call it body and soul, maybe you wouldn't. But anyway, you feel the essence of the song, even though it's totally divorced of melody. I mean, it's in its own world. It's a new creation. And so I remember doing a date, supposed to doing Duke Ellington music, and the producer kept wanting on the melody all the time. I said, well, I mean, it's cool, but listen to a lot of great recordings. They don't play the melody, for a whole chorus.
Mm.
You play the melody and expand on it. You do some things to it. So, concept of playing the melody or not playing the melody, but playing in the spirit of the melody. I mean, what do you think about that?
Oh, I agree.
I'm interviewing you now.
No, but I agree. Especially in this COVID time, I discovered how you spend more time with your instrument. And I was playing guitar a lot, like every day, and sometimes just playing a major third and playing with that major third up and down, or some simple stuff like that. Not necessarily, of course, technique and fast and everything, but sometimes I just played two notes, and it was amazing. It was like a universe. I rediscovered like a basic G major chord on the guitar, and I played it, and it was like, man, it's so beautiful. It's so kind of not really answering the question, but yeah, I think it's it's this simplicity. I think that the more I realize it, I mean,
your voice,
I find more this in the simplicity, I'm finding more beauty now lately. I mean, I used to write like 10 years ago or 15 really complicated music, lots of odd meters, incredibly heavy harmony. But now I'm just like, I write, 4 bars, and I love composing. I mean, and it's enough. I don't know. It's maybe we change, of course, also through time, I hope, and develop, but it's
well, I mean, like John Lewis, like I developed a friendship with him after our recording, and he's, I was hoping that by the time I got to my age now, I'd be eliminating a lot of stuff. I'm trying to work on eliminating stuff. So it's not adding, it's eliminating. So
yeah,
to make a statement with less notes is actually more difficult, but more beautiful. And it takes a lot of discipline. And especially, okay, to be honest, you go out, you do a gig and you're playing for people who don't know shit most of the time. And you're playing, and if you don't play a lot of notes, they get bored, or they think you're not doing anything. Like, unless some people have the magic name or recognition through the years that they can do anything, how good or bad it is. But people like me who have never achieved that kind of romantic thing where no matter what you do, it's cool.
Interesting to see.
I won't mention names. I've heard some horrendous playing, but horrendous playing by some well-known, legendary people, and if you and I do that, they'd be really pissed off. So, or maybe they wouldn't know the difference anyway. But the point, to have an aura, so you are allowed to be simple. So when you get up and you play, I try to keep it simple, and sometimes I lose the discipline and start playing too many notes, and then people like it, so it's worse. It makes it reinforces the bullshit that you're trying to eliminate. So I guess it's an ongoing thing. I'm still working at it. I guess if I haven't found it by now, I probably won't find it. I'll be 82 in a week. So I guess I don't know what to think. I just hoping that I'll be able to, really crystallize the music, in other words.
Yeah.
And less is more again. Just I'm pretty intense. I have a fair amount of intensity, which can be a problem. Sometimes drummers get excited, when you play with intensity, and then they go nuts, and so so that's another thing I have to deal with. So I don't want to cut the intensity, but I want to cut the excess. So it's a whole bunch of things we have to think about all the time. So we think about it so we don't have to think about it when we're playing. And that's the main thing. When you're playing, you should be thinking. But I'm still working. In other words, I'm still working on it. And if I ever get it right, I'll let you know.
That's good to hear from you, actually.
You were asking about composition, so I don't know. My composition, yeah. I have a few compositions, but sometimes composition will come out of I wrote a tune a long time ago, a very short one called Yet Another Tear, because it was a time when a bunch of guys that I really loved were dying. The Duke Ellington guys, Ben Webster died, Hodges died, people died. And So I wrote a slow ballad called Yet Another Tear, and that was to reflect that feeling. So anyway, I don't have a compositional technique, obviously. One time, I was doing some kind of a school thing in San Francisco area, and anyway, Eric Alexander was heading some kind of little class, and he asked. I was there with Charles McPherson, a couple people. What is your harmonic technique? And I thought about it. I don't have a harmonic technique. I mean, how do you have a harmonic technique as a horn player? I said, no, I don't have a harmonic technique. He said, what do you mean? I just try to connect phrases. Is that a harmonic technique? It's a melodic technique. Did Ornette Coleman have a harmonic technique? Obviously not. I don't know who has a Coleman Hawkins had a harmonic technique, I guess. It was pretty advanced, but I don't know what you mean by having. I couldn't figure out what it meant to have a harmonic technique. Do you know what that means?
I don't know whether he meant like by some harmonic cadences or, you know, like approaches that you use when composing, maybe, you know.
Well, I when I was young, I used to work on like shit like superimposing, you know, minor third stuff like C7, E flat 7, G flat 7, even A kind of. And then I would do that, and then I realized, well, it doesn't. It's like, so that means it's 12 notes, it's 11 and a half notes. So what's the difference? It's all like you have 11 and a half notes, and you know, if you're a monk, you can use 12, and you just kind of like, it's all how you resolve the dominant chord, basically. Yeah. So that's my harmonic technique. My harmonic technique is, you know, resolution. Yeah. Repose and resolution. You're going someplace, you're ending someplace. And so if that's a harmonic technique, but I couldn't think of. Maybe there are different harmonic techniques that I should learn. I don't know what they are, but there's 12 notes. So figure it out and do the best you can with them. And Byrd said you're only half step away from the right note. So maybe that's a technique. the Charlie Parker technique.
He must have. He was right. He must have done something right. I mean, come on, you know, it was Byrd. So
he was definitely right. One guy I got a review once a long time ago. I always get positive reviews, but the guy said, the problem with Lew Tabackin, he doesn't play any wrong notes. It was a flute album, I think. And I said, well, I thought about it. I said, man, I played wrong notes every 8 bars or so. But I thought that the process of the craft, or what do you want to call it, art and craft, is to make a wrong note a right note.
Yeah.
So you just don't like, oh great, man, I played the wrong note. It's wonderful. And there was a certain point where that was considered creative. When guys would get up there and like just play something really terrible and oh, it's creative. It's an expression. So if you make a mistake and you just kind of make that note better, or you work around it and resolve it.
Yeah.
Or those are the tricks of the trade, so to speak. You don't kind of announce it. Hey man, I made a wrong note. Isn't that wonderful? So it's interesting how perception, a lot of the criticism and perception is, even in the positive, even if it's positive, they don't usually get the point.
Yeah, I agree.
Like I think Miles just said something like, I make a record and there's maybe like 2 bars that are really creative, but no one gets it except me.
Probably. But No, I wanted to ask you, Lou, just one last thing, not to take too much of your time, but like, you know, we mentioned Byrd, and there's this record you did with Freddie Hubbard and Roy Haynes was on drums. And how did that story happen with Freddie? I mean, how did you end up in that group or on that album, and how was that experience like for you?
Well,
with
that
Roy
was
also?
like they were trying to elevate Freddie at the point. Dizzy died, and they were trying to make him. They didn't have any superstar trumpet players, so they decided to try to elevate him, you know, to make him a superstar. So they surrounded him with a kind of a quasi all-star band, supposedly, and so Freddie Hubbard All-Stars. So we went out we did European tour, we did festivals.
Oh, really?
Roy Haynes Roy Haynes canceled it before we went to Europe. It's another book. But the point is, I think it might have been George Weins' office put this group together, and we never rehearsed. Every time, you know, we try to get a rehearsal, Freddie would fluff it off, and we had a big concert in Kennedy Center with no rehearsal. You know, what do you want to play? And it was, you know, like Tabackin comes up with this. Oh, I have a tune, and some odd meter tune. It kind of, I don't know what it was. And we're trying to play all this stuff in the concert, and we didn't know what we were doing. So the record company thought that we were an organized group. We had a rehearsal, and we went to the studio. We still didn't have rehearsal, and there was a woman. I forgot what she thought. She wrote a tune, and it was like really like fragmented. It wasn't exactly in normal form. So we had to figure out a way to play this. And spent like hours on it to play it. Actually, the album came out quite well for what it was. And, but anyway, that was an interesting experience doing, you know, the European tours. Freddie was quite a trip. I mean, like Freddie would try to kill you. His whole thing in life was to destroy the guy he's playing with. And he'd get really intense, and we'd be playing like trading 8s or 4s, whatever. I wouldn't give in, man. I'd rather die. I would rather bleed and throw up, but I would never give in to him. Man, I'm like, I wouldn't allow myself. And that was like, it was always a war with Freddie Hubbard. You know, he's just trying to beat you to death. But it was interesting. I mean, he also had his kinder moments, you know. But again, that's another book, Freddie Hubbard experience. Yeah. And we became kind of friends, and he was a guest on, I think our last concert. It was recorded at Carnegie Hall with the big band. Freddie was a guest, and he behaved himself pretty much. But anyway, it was really interesting. I remember playing in Nice, and you'd always want the monitor to be really loud. It was terrible, and now I'm still suffering from that. And I get off the bandstand, and I'm on a schedule to join George Weins' Newport All-Stars. And so I get up on the stage, and man, one of my heroes, Slam Stewart, was there. I mean, Slam Stewart was a total genius, and a really good drummer, Oliver Jackson, and all his regular horn players like Scott Hamilton and Warren Bechet, and playing all this old stuff, you know. And I never actually played this stuff. I mean, I heard it, a lot of it, you know, but I never quite played it. And I had a great time. So all these guys are bored, you know, they play the same shit all the time. And to me, it was new. and I had a great time in it. And I got off the bandstand, and all these British guys from Jazz Journal used to call them moldy figs, you know, those old fart guys. And they said, "Man, we didn't know you could play like that. We thought you were avant-garde." So I did this long interview, and I got the cover of the magazine and two versions, or you know, the interview was too long. It was on my low battery thing. Anyway, so that was interesting as a byproduct. But, you know, Freddie Hubbard experiences, I can tell you stories about that, but he's great. He was a great player.
Yeah.
And obviously, but he was so macho, and that's what did him in the end.
Yeah.
You know, he played with John Faddis. He's got to try to play high notes like Faddis. You can't beat him at that. And, you know, it was a little bit too competitive. If you just like cooled it a little bit, he would probably still be around playing, you know. I think, I don't know. He just didn't. A lot of guys don't know how good they are. You know, they're insecure in a way. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to do, you know, be that, you know, aggressive.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we had enough. I think we had. There's so much more to say, but that's for another book.
Yeah, and your battery is dying also.
My battery.